Today we're sitting with my big brother, Jacob Alexander Plicque III. Growing up, I watched Jacob work all kinds of jobs, bussing tables at an Italian restaurant, cashiering at Blockbuster, RIP, and technical support at Comcast. Jacob transitioned into a career in technology, becoming a solutions architect, which is a role that straddles sales and technical topics. Bro, you went from making $5.15 an hour to making well into the well above 100,000 a year with no degree. Welcome to the podcast, my brother.
Yo, what's up? Good morning. Thank you for having me. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, so just walk us. My lighting sucks, but walk us through how this all happened. So you went from making $5.15 an hour, and 10 years later, now you're making well above 100,000 a year. So how does that happen without getting a college degree?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. It's something that it's becoming a very common conversation topic for me, because I think one of the things that's happened is kind of as an aside from that is I've started to think about the fact that keeping salaries and monetary pieces to yourself is actually not or it's actually detrimental to you and your career. So you want to understand what's happening around you, and so I started to really think about that, and so that's actually how a lot of the conversations that I have with a lot of my friends about this and how this journey kind of started for me. So I'll actually kind of start kind of in the middle and then work my way back. So when I worked at Comcast, it's not quite 10 years ago. When I worked at Comcast and late in that, and this is about 2007, 2008, I already kind of understood that tech was where I wanted to be. Coincidentally from that, I recognized the fact, and fortunately at the time Comcast did too, that I was number one from a technical support and customer service perspective. Everyone was leaning on me to be the technical subject matter expert on something or everything. In a lot of cases, it felt like at the time. And so that really resonated with me. And it's okay, what do I do with that? But something that's really funny, I think, especially considering you're my little brother, is when your mother, or our mother in this case, says something, you in a lot of cases, it's because it's your mom, it's automatically a bad idea in your mind. So one time I was playing with one of our mini desktops that we had over the years, and mom's, I'll never forget it, she was just like, hey, maybe you should consider a job doing computer work. And I was just like, whatever, mom, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
mom, you were right, thank you very much. So but one of the things that sort of happened is leaving Comcast, working or leaving Blockbuster, going to work at Comcast, and a few of the technical support roles that I had were essentially those few years were me trying to transition into tech. I always knew that was where I wanted to go, and I knew that the right way for me to get there was through some sort of IT help desk. But I couldn't find my way around or in. Now, one of the things that really was helpful that I learned back then, this is in 2010, 2011, 2012, was my gift of gab and the ability to network quickly was becoming really, really important. When I worked at web.com, there was a VP named Bill Berzegi. I still remember his name. And he walked by, I'll never forget it. So you know how those typical cubicles work, the big ass cubicles, you have the two monitors and right in the middle. And I had my CompTIA A+ certification book on the left-hand side. And he walked by and he stopped. And this is a guy that I'd had maybe 3 words with the entire time. And he was just like, because optics is everything. And he was just like, that's interesting. And then he asked me what I wanted to do. And that was actually just that conversation and him being like, oh yeah, let me help you. And then next thing I knew, I was pulled out the phones to install phones and laptops and things like that. And so that was really where that start happened. And then he ended up leaving, and so my contact dissipated, and so that's my momentum. So I ended up working at this mortgage collections company and was getting a little frustrated because I was still grinding and trying to get in, and something we'll get into later, but how do I get into this world, right? And so weirdly enough, it was a Craigslist ad that I answered. So there was this company at the time called Award Tech that was looking for these remote IT support folks. And at the time, I'd been, installing something like Java and printers and things like that was just something I just knew, because I just knew how to do, or like if something was wrong, I knew how to fix it.
Yeah.
And so I ended up answering this ad thinking it was complete garbage, but it ended up being like very real. And I interviewed really well and ended up working as a remote support contractor for Geek Squad. So how it would work is they would call in, they had this support contract, and then I would remote in and, my computer's running slow, there's a virus, blah, 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 install my printer, all that good stuff. And that was incredible. I worked like for that a little over a year. That was around $18 an hour, which was amazing because I went from, $5.15 to $10 an hour to $18 an hour.
Wow.
So it was just like, boom. So like, I was like, jackpot. But, but around then, this is 2012. Yeah. Around 2012, I knew, and this is something that I recommend to everybody, is I had already figured out my end game. And really the end game was, how do I hit six figures by the time I'm 40 years old? And so, and for context, I'm 34 right now. And so I had a list of things that I needed to hit.
Right.
Year 1 through 2, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, all these other things. Now, weirdly enough, this still included degrees. Like this was, so I was doing IT kind of help desk work at the time. And at the time, the way that things were really centralized from a IT perspective was you either were a developer or you were an infrastructure guy or girl. And so I was like, I don't want to code. This is going to be a problem. And you'll see this come back in a second. So I'm going to go do infrastructure. All right. Network or systems/servers. And I was like, networks, I like building things. Systems. Okay, cool. So then sysadmin work, which typically gets you into the 50s and 60s, 60K a year. And then it eventually leads you to a systems engineering role, which was listed at between 90K and 120K a year. And I was like, that's it. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that was interesting though, is typically like when looking at job descriptions, because that's what I was looking at, was like it required like, a bachelor's degree and 5 to 7 years of experience. Right. And so I was just like, okay, that's how I will go. So one of the things that happened though, is as I moved from that Geek Squad contracting role to an actual real like corporate IT help desk role, and then later, led me into, more deeper desktop support. And we'll get into, some of my experience at my previous, 2 companies now ago at Fanatics, when I did a bunch of different things. Was that my and that wasn't like a wonderful scholastic. I find that it's something that I had to be really passionate about for me to be successful at. What's really funny is like early on, right after high school, and something that was I was actually wanting to do video game journalism. But the problem is that to do that, you have to write about a bunch of boring shit. And that just wasn't resonating with me at all. So like that flew by. But what happened was the degree requirements that I had in my mind, and at the time we have parents that are, incredibly smart and have 3 master's degrees between the 2 of them. And like my idea was I eventually like matched them, but my experience was up-leveling me, and my schooling was me catching up. Or from a degree and class load perspective, because like I'm doing things in the classroom that I've been doing at my work for years. So that doesn't really resonate, and that's kind of boring. But then when I would plateau, I'd go plug and say, okay, well, then maybe I need to go back and do the schooling thing. But then like once that kind of squeaky wheel started to turn, the experience wheel kept turning more. And so it just never got back to coming back together to being the full kind of story. And right. So it just became a situation of like, I just don't need this at all. And so, but I also think it's because I had the groundwork in front of me and I knew where I was going. And then like when I started striking things out, like, and we'll dive in deeper, I'm sure. But then when I joined Gremlin and I just turned 32, it was when I hit that 6 figures. And then I just kind of scratched out the whole thing and then did it, 8 years earlier than I planned.
Right. Well, I mean, so you walked us through your career and that transition. Like, you kind of glossed over, like, give us like some more details.
Yeah, I didn't know where you wanted to kind of dive in.
There's a lot of intimidation. So. It's like, so you've given us a high level overview, but like give us like thought processes and emotions and uncertainty.
Sure. Yeah. Because it certainly wasn't all puppies and sunshine, right? Like so there was absolutely some of the times where, here's a good example. So I worked at Fanatics for about 4 years and some change, and overall a pretty great experience. I started as a service desk, technician, desktop support, junior sysadmin, and then that eventually worked me into so I did that for about 8 months, and then this overnight operational support role came up. And at that point, I had been really driving home with my boss that like I'm looking for something deeper. Like I've played this game, I'm an expert at this. Like how do I up level? How do I get more? And so essentially like I was like the level 1 support, but I was like the senior guy, and then the level 2 support was more of the operational like incident management and patching and things like that engineering stuff that I was really like, that's where I wanted to go. But it was overnight, and I was just like, I don't want to work overnight. And on top of that, like it was Wednesday through Saturday, and I'll never forget. And Carl Moosbaugh is still the best boss I've ever had. He sat me down in his office, and he was like, "Look, Jacob, you can't just opportunity doesn't just come boxed in the way that you think it will be. You either and keeping in mind this conversation had happened after I turned the job down twice, and he was like, I'm only going to ask like one more time, and then we're going to move on. But like I think you're making a diabolical mistake here.
Is that the word he used?
Not diabolical, but like it sounds better, right? But no, I think it was like more like fucking mistake. We were very honest with each other.
Okay.
He's awesome. Since retired, living the life. But I remember like I sat back and I was like, man, and he was like, you don't have to say anything right now. Like just think about it over the weekend and let me know on Monday. And I just kind of did the classic, like, this is inconvenient, so no. But I have so much to gain by this inconvenience. And it was really a really hard decision. And so I ended up saying yes and taking it. And it's funny looking back on it now, because like a lot of these processes that I had to create manually to escalate things if something broke, because like there are things like, run books that if this alert goes off, you need to do this, and this. If that doesn't work, wake somebody up because things are about to get, worse. But we have companies like PagerDuty and OpsGenie that like do that for you. But I had to like physically pick up a phone and like, oh God, I hope this is the right department. And then sometimes it wasn't, and it's like 3 a.m. and I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. So that wasn't fun, but I learned a lot. And so so by working overnight, I got to be a sponge to everything, because at that point I became the person that was keeping the lights on. Because if something breaks at 1 a.m, I'm the first person that has to do something about it. If I don't do something about it, that's a direct correlation to revenue loss. And so I have to, so the buck kind of starts with me, right? And then how does that kind of build? So, and one of the things that ended up happening, I did that for about 16 months or so. But I remember and this was a big deal, was because it was Wednesday through Saturday, like my social life was completely game over. And like, as something that you know is I'm a mega, mega, mega extrovert. So like it was a very huge sacrifice in order to make a career move. Fortunately, it worked out because at that time, because I started to do and be able to fix all these different things, and so like Cyber Monday outages were, you know, well, actually we'll get to Cyber Monday in a second, but like outages were just a part of life, and so you have to jump in the deep end of the proverbial pool and fix it, whatever it is, or figure out how to get the right person to help you fix it, because there is no like round two, right? This is a direct revenue situation here. And so one of the things that I remember super vividly was we were working overnight, and we had like one of our fulfillment centers just fall off the face of the map, like monitoring, like, yep, there's a Jacksonville fulfillment center, and then sea of red. I was just like, what happened? And then the next thing I know, like, you know, we're like, okay, is JA okay? Is like the internet okay? Like, what's going on over there? So it became like a situation of like, what do you do? Like, there is no like panic, like you got to act. And so like, that's still something that still resonates with me even now. But actually that experience directly got me promoted to a cloud engineering position, and then eventually a site reliability engineering position as well. So yeah, I can dive in all over the map, like, you know. So you know, where do you want to go?
Right. Yeah. So the name of the podcast is the Go For It podcast, and what
Mm-hmm.
I'm really trying to accomplish with this podcast is there are people who are standing, to continue the pool reference. There are people who are standing at the edge of the proverbial pool. They're dipping the pool. I said pool. They're standing at the edge of the pool, and they're dipping their toes into the water. They're like, well, you know, I don't know if I'm smart enough, or do I need to get a college degree? Like, oh, I want to work at Google, like, or Facebook. I need to get a degree. Like, speak to that person who is listening to this podcast, looking to see what it takes to make that move.
Yeah, sure. So I think it kind of goes back to my point around like, what's your end game, and then working backwards.
Right.
So like that list that I had it posted everywhere. It was on my desk, it was on my refrigerator, and then it was always like frontal lobe and like right in front of me from just a goal perspective. And so, and this, of course, this was like a 15-year like bullet point like plan. But one of the things that I think that we make a mistake about, and this is not even just like young people, this is also people that are going round two or lap two of their career, like they've done something and they are trying to transition into tech, is they spend a lot of time sitting on the proverbial diving board, not knowing if they should jump or not, when you can't do anything if you don't jump, right? Like literally, like the worst case scenario is to do nothing. So in my mind, like it became a situation of, I know where I'm going. It's just, how do I like get there? So build those pieces. And so one of the things, which typically is like why you go to school, but the reason why that didn't work was, I think in my case, like it was all about this, like you look at this 4-year curriculum, when it's like, when you look at something like, say, IT certs, where you can get stuff done in a couple of weeks or a month of study and get immediate value right away. Because, you know, in a lot of cases, if you go and look at a lot of these job descriptions now, they don't even require a degree in a lot of cases. Now the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, you know, bachelor's and master's degree. But it says in a lot of cases, or related experience.
Right.
So utilize that. So that's one thing. And also, and I cannot say this louder, apply for everything. Even if you don't think that you're qualified for it, you have absolutely nothing to lose.
Someone's knocking on my door. Hold on.
Get a job that you don't apply for, right? So a lot of people will look at a job description and just be like, well, this doesn't fit. Like, there's no way that they'll even talk to me or hire me, which is just not true at all. Every job I've had has been a job that I was not qualified for on paper. Every single one. And so, but I also knew that like I had the confidence enough because of the fact, because like it wasn't even like, I think now it's definitely like I know that I'm confident enough to and to have the gift of gab to walk myself into the door based off of the things that I say and the things that I know. But at the time, you know, in 2012, 2013, 2014, I definitely didn't have that gusto, but I was able to build it because there's already a checkbox that they recognize that you have something to say because they answered you, right? Or they want to talk to you. And so utilize things like those phone screens as a way for you to test that. But don't think about it from the fact that like you have to get through this phone screen. Utilize it as its own practice. Like, so this new job that I'm starting on Monday was one of, you know, 6 or 7 different interviews that I had, right? And all of them went like particularly well. This was just the best option for me.
Right.
But I was only able to come to that conclusion based off of the conversations that I had leading up to this one. Because it's actually out of the 6 companies, it was the interview that I did last, because I was able to really like focus on the messaging of who I am and what my experience is. And so each interview was better than the last one. Like that's just something that I know carte blanche. So that's something that that's kind of happened almost by accident. Right. So that's really another piece that's incredibly important. And also networking is everything, because like everyone's heard like it's not what you know, but it's who. Everyone's heard that story. So a good example of that, and one of the things that happened, and the reason why I actually got my foot in the door at Fanatics in the first place was because of networking. So weirdly enough, and this gentleman's also named Jacob, we both worked at Kemper at doing IT help desk work, and we both recognized that it was time for us to go at the exact same time on the exact same day. And so we literally were like, you know what? I got your back. You have mine. Wherever you go, like you let me know and then we'll kind of work together. So essentially we were both working together to find something new. He started a week before I did. Like literally he left and I started the following week, back to back. Because we had been working together for a year. We had really good like work chemistry. We trusted each other. And so we ended up working at Fanatics together for almost 2 years after that. And so, and this is, and like even a lot of those contacts that I made over the 4+ years that I worked at Fanatics still resonate with companies that I talk to today. Those people that are asking for references and things like that. Those are people that I still, you know, utilize as that, and then as references, and then vice versa. So that's another kind of piece that's, I think, really, really, really important.
Yeah. So on the networking bit, I think that's a critical component, because I'd say the vast majority of the jobs that I've had in my career came from networking. When I first started at a marketing company, it was because I was in college in 2010. I knew I didn't want to be a mechanical engineer. I was telling people I wanted to be a programmer. And I got an email out of the blue from a dude that was running a marketing company in Jacksonville, because one of his employees was one of my friends, and he told his boss that I wanted to be a programmer. Boom, I started at that company, did that for a year and a half. And then I ended up building software at that company, wanting to network, not even network, I needed to get help. I was so new, I needed help with the Ruby programming language. So I started going to the Ruby Jacks meetup group. And there was a guy named Micah Cooper, who was always helping me out. He ended up recruiting me for my next job. Yeah. And then for the job after that, when I moved to Zencase, it was because of work that I did at the previous marketing company. We were interfacing with the developer by the name of Gary Foster. He knew that I was in the job market. Like literally my entire career has been as a result of networking. And just a quick point about that. I think that networking has a bad rap. It's like, it's kind of like, I think people see it as like shady. Like, just don't go there and try and be a social climber. Go in there, be enthusiastic, want to meet people, want to talk about the thing that the thing's about, and it just happens naturally.
Yes. And to really dive into that, being genuine speaks to everyone. It requires very little effort. All you have to do is be you. And that resonates with people.
Right.
Like I had a lot of the work that I did as a solutions architect at Gremlin was around, kind of talked about marketing, was around meetup talks and kind of building a personal brand of trust, because essentially we're trying to get people to utilize this product, and that with the idea that it makes their engineering lives better. And so it doesn't even matter what the product looks like. It matters how I tell that story in a lot of cases. So I still get messages from people that I talk to at a meetup talk of like 40 people, maybe less than that, much like, and like just like hit me up on LinkedIn. Hey man, like can you give me some guidance on X, Y, or Z?
Right.
Or in another case, like, hey man, like I saw that you were looking, we're hiring for this. Would that be something that you'd be interested in? And that required absolutely zero effort from me to re-implement that connection. They reached out to me.
That's right.
And so it was just like, it's a very like obvious thing, I think, to both of us, with the benefit of hindsight, because we made the right move from that perspective. And I think it's because like, I don't even think it's a matter of like networking having a bad rap, or like there has to be some sort of like, not a financial benefit to it at the end game, because at the end of the day, we're just talking about like people, and people have this natural need to connect. It doesn't have to be
That's right.
employer to employee. It can be, do you want to grab a beer and just talk about life for like 30 minutes? And then that conversation could, whether it makes you money now or 5 years from now is irrelevant. It's just connection. And then everything else is dessert, really, when it comes down to it.
Right. Yeah. So there's a new social networking app that I've been on pretty heavily. It's called Clubhouse, and it's a social networking platform that has like, it's sort of like a online conference, kind of like they have little audio rooms. It's very similar to Discord, where there's like voice channels and people put in topics. So I did one recently called Learning to Code. It was a Learning to Code seminar. There was a bunch of people that showed up, and somebody hit me up on Twitter. They said, hey, I'm in a boot camp. Where do I go after I graduate to get a job? And I literally said, go to meetup groups. Like, you're learning Python and JavaScript, go to the Python meetup, go to the JavaScript meetup. And like, there's people like me who go to those meetups to try and put people on, because there are so few people who are, I'd say in the 3 years that I ran the Ruby Jax coding organization, there were so few people that actually committed to getting it done. Like, I'd say there was only a dozen people that I helped. So that's awesome, right? Like, there was a dozen people that I helped in those 3 years, either transition careers or helped them out. But I went through hundreds of people who just weren't putting in the same effort. So when you see somebody who's actually like, you can tell that they're really putting in work, like, you just want to help that person. And so
they're like a Christmas light in the room, right? Because you nailed it, right? Because you always, in the back of your mind, you're like, keep an eye on this one.
Right.
Keep an eye on this one. Hell, my buddy Adam's been trying to hire you for like 5 fucking years. So
yes. Right.
Still, like every couple of months, he's like, "Hey, is Josh doing?" I'm like, "Go away, Adam." But yeah, like it's funny because because I have a bunch of friends that are especially right now with COVID, and they're like, they're kind of seeing. I don't want to say like seeing me as an example. That seems really strange to say, but how did I get here? And like it's really kind of fun to kind of go back and kind of reminisce and stuff. And so, but it seems so simple to me, because like I think I figured it out almost by accident. Like it was just a natural, like, it's something you said kind of about networking, but I think to zoom back out a bit, like I think that this is also something that was pretty natural as well, because it was just like, as I learned, and because I've always been like a grinder, and like as I learned, that opened kind of my eyes to everything. And so another tidbit that I wanted to express as well is to always reevaluate your situation, because it's something that you and I and our younger siblings are talking about and dealing with is is the fact that, and I think this is the hard truth, is that no company is more loyal to you than you. And so I've always made a mental note to reevaluate where I stood with a company. And is this naturally benefiting my personal and professional goals? And then when it didn't, it's time to go.
Right.
And the thing that happens, though, is as a positive consequence to that, is you typically make a lot more money by leaving. Like the last 2 jumps that I've made have been 30% increases in salary.
Right.
With not really much negotiation at all. And so it versus, your classic 2%, 3%, 4%, bump in pay, which is nothing, right? And so if you look at my Fanatics experience, there was a promotion every year until I left.
Mm-hmm.
Every single year until I left. At Gremlin, there was a promotion at the year and some change mark, and then I left. And so and then before that, I worked at Kemper for a year. Before that, I worked at Geek Squad for a year. And I think there's kind of that. I think this stigma is a lot less than it used to be. But 10, 15 years ago, it was like, you stay where you're at. This is where your bread's buttered. And it's just like, no, actually, you need me more than I need you. Because there are, especially in Jacksonville, there are hundreds of places that need tech people that don't know how the hell to find it in a lot of cases. Even now, even with, the multitude of folks that have lost their jobs and things like that. So the market is, pretty crazy competitive right now. But that is what makes you different, is that networking piece, not your freaking degree in computer science that you're not using, or your degree in your case, mechanical engineering, that you're not using. And so I actually want to throw the question to you. There's something we talked about that I think is an interesting tidbit, and the fact that your degree is in mechanical engineering. And I think, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think when we talked about this was many, many years ago, but you believe that your degree was a base level platform in which for you to springboard yourself into where you are today. But I often think, even though I think that's true, I think that you could have done that without that as well. So I'm curious to know your thoughts.
That's an excellent question. So I learned something very critical in the mechanical engineering degree that has carried over into the rest of my life. So while I agree, I probably could have done it without it, the reason, what gives me an edge over a lot of other programmers, is that I have a very precise and well-defined way of thinking. And that comes from my engineering degree. And the reason why, so that thinking process, I've spoken about it many times on social media, but it never gets traction because I think people, it's so simple that people discount the power of it. What I learned in the mechanical engineering degree is that there's 3 steps to solving a problem. Step 1 is define the problem. Step 2 is list your assumptions. Step 3 is design your solution with respect to the constraints in step 2, the assumptions and the constraints. Engineering school was so particular about that if you started at designing the solution and you didn't explicitly list your assumptions, you'd lose 30%. And all engineering exams, it's like 3 or 4 questions. That's it. 3 questions, design this solution, design this solution, design this solution. It's 50 minutes, and it's always 3 or 4 questions. And in the vast majority of those classes, if you didn't explicitly define your assumptions before designing your solution, you'd lose 30% of your points.
Right.
So that defined way of thinking has transferred over to tech. Most people start at step 3. Most people just, and my canonical example of this is the Snapchat map tracking feature. Snapchat has a feature where there's a map where you can see where everybody's at on the map. It has no utility at all. It's not useful in any way. They've invested so much money in that feature, but it doesn't actually provide any value. Why am I looking at this freaking map? And it's clear that they put a lot of time and energy into that tech, but they didn't start at step 1. What are they trying to achieve? What is someone trying to achieve on that map? I don't care.
No, you're right. It's funny that you say that, because one of the funny things about doing chaos engineering was about challenging those assumptions. Right. Because we're going to stop traffic from hitting your database, from your application hitting your database. How does your application handle that? Does it fail over to your secondary, the thing that you built to save you when shit goes wrong? Have you tested it? Do you know what happens? And so you're right. And this isn't just engineering design decisions, right? This is business level tech decisions. People are moving, and everyone loves Kubernetes. People are moving to Kubernetes to say that they moved to Kubernetes, because it looks great on their resume. It has nothing to do with business value. That's another rant for another time. But the point is super valuable. I still think, because the thing that's really funny about what you said about that kind of 3-step process is I couldn't agree with you more. My point is, and I don't think you disagree, is that there are a multitude of ways in which to learn that process that don't require 4 years of engineering school.
Absolutely, yeah. So it was a 5-year degree. Like literally, I'm going to just reiterate the point.
Yeah.
It was a 5-year education in precisely that. Like that is the only takeaway. It's the most critical takeaway from engineering school, and has provided me incredible value in regards to being a problem solver in people's organizations. Like people look at me like I'm a Superman, or that people see me as like I'm just this super smart genius. No, it's just most people don't have a structured way of thinking, and that process has allowed me. Most people start at solutions. If you have to start with the perfect example to achieve the same thing without engineering school, it's the scientific method. The scientific method is problem, hypothesis. Hypothesis is you listing your assumptions. What do I expect? What is going on? The problem is, and then you actually execute the experiment, and then this is how you code. Actually, this is actually how you code. What is my problem? What do I think should happen? I execute it. And coding is always, okay, this is broken, and I go back to, I change my hypothesis. Okay, that didn't work. Here's my new hypothesis. Try that.
Now go do it again. Exactly. Yes.
That is my edge. Like literally, like that's the reason why I've been successful in tech, and it transcends mechanical engineering. It's problem solving across all industries, all verticals, all areas of life. Romantic problems. My partner reacts this way when I say this. What's my hypothesis for why she does that? Maybe, like for example, okay, romantically in my own life, there was a girlfriend that I had who kept calling me after. I have a rule where people don't call me after midnight, but she would call me at 2 a.m. all the time, even though I had those boundaries. And so I wouldn't answer the phone, and it was frustrating. And so I had the hypothesis where, maybe there's something in her past that has led to her behavior of trying to trample on my boundaries. Lo and behold, she's had a lot of boyfriends who cheated on her. And so like that whole calling you after midnight was like, just make sure, hey, are you cheating? Like,
you're at home by yourself, right?
Yeah.
I'm playing video games. What the hell do you want? Right. No, it's true. It's so funny because I'm so glad you said it, because I was going to bring up the scientific method like specifically next anyway, because I joke about it all the time in like talks that I do. I'm like, yep, 6th grade biology's back, my dudes, because it's like so obvious, right? Like we're still doing it, and because it's crazy to me that it's because it is just that simple. We're doing this. We're using that same thing we learned in middle school. We're not even talking about college now. We're talking about middle school, right? It's so like it's still that process that makes us better. And so like the fact that that's still an edge for both of us, so now in our 30s, is insane to me. Like how is that like in the fact that we found it in 2 different like lanes of thinking is really interesting to me, I think, too, on top of that. And so like it's but it seems so obvious to me. And so like one of the things that's really important in like we're talking about networking and stuff, right, and that's something that I think that you would like to do, and this is kind of why this podcast even exists, right, is you want to pay it forward and because something that you asked earlier was like what was like the emotions and like the pain points and things like that, right? And so like I'm definitely like right now I'm coming out of a pretty bad with the benefit of hindsight, a pretty bad burnout, because like my passion is like almost my existence. I was joking about like talking about a bunch of different interviews or whatever, right? Like and I mentioned in an interview, and and the interviewer was like, "Holy smokes! Like that is like what a great quote." I was like, "Passion is my baseline. That's just where I live, and then everything else is on
That's
top
awesome.
of that."
That's a quote. Yeah, that's awesome. That should be on Twitter.
Yep. Actually, I think I did end up tweeting it out like back then. I was like, because I said it like off the cuff, and I was just like, "Oh man, that's a good
that is
thing."
awesome.
So 5-5, Jacob. But so because I think that like what happens in a lot of cases is like passion is almost viewed as a detriment when it is like such a powerful tool. Because I don't think that I mentioned, like, I don't even know if I would be as good of a technologist if I wasn't passionate about it, right? But I also think that that's also why people flame out of like their original careers a lot too, is they get to the dance and they're like, I don't want to be at prom. But they can't rectify the fact that like I spent the last 3 and 4 and 5 years getting to prom, and now that I'm here, I don't want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and that's, you know, especially, God forbid, you've got $70,000, $100,000 worth of fucking student loans on top of that to deal with, right? And so I think to bring it right back to challenging assumptions, like that has to be consistent in your life for you to be successful, because, you know, and in a lot of cases, it can make you, you know, unpopular if you're not doing it in the right rooms, right? But ultimately, it's a valuable step, and I think in both of our careers individually, something that has made us almost successful because we ask the right questions and we challenge assumptions. Like I've joked with mom and dad about this all the time, and I tell Joe and Alexis this, our younger siblings, to challenge everything. Absolutely everything. Now, I'm not saying go up to your CEO, kick in the door, you're wrong. I'm saying when you hear something that doesn't make sense to you, ask, delineate, debate, talk. It's huge. Keeping your mouth shut does no one any good.
Right. So I just want to ask about, I have an opinion on the landscape of tech. Like, I think Google, like you said, Google and Facebook, they're no longer requiring bachelor degrees. I know for me, I've hired probably 10 or 11 people in my career, and the person's education was pretty much, it was like a baseline of doesn't matter, and it was only a plus side if they're like it was in the plus column if they were if they had an engineering degree or a computer science degree or an information technology degree, but it pretty much was like not what mattered. Like, can you do this job? Like, can I give you requirements, and can you ship code? That's what I care about. Like your background, like you'll learn. Tech is a career where you're going to be learning on the job. Like, I don't care what you know. I want to know, like,
can
what
you learn?
The thought process is, and can you learn on the job?
Yes.
Like, that's what matters more than what you already know. So I just want to ask you about the landscape of tech in regards to, like, I want to call this podcast "No Degree, No Problem."
Right.
I think the landscape has changed. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I'm bleeding proof of it. And I think one thing that I realized over the last 5 years or so is I thought that I was an anomaly / like special, when the reality is like, I think I came in kind of on like an early kind of wave of that. And then my success, I'm not saying individually my success, but people like me succeeding without it sort of kind of opened people's eyes. And so I 100% think that it's the right way to go. I think for some people, it's, you know, that need that structure and that like consistent like level of feedback from a scholastic perspective, you know, which is just A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. It works. That never, like, again, with the benefit of hindsight, it never worked. It was never going to work for me. I'm a 6-time college dropout and I'm proud of it because I was like, because I was always like, all right, I've hit this plateau. like, let's try something else, right? And it was never, I'm stuck, so let me go back to the drawing board from a degree perspective. It was, what else do I want to learn that then gets me up, the proverbial mountain or rock wall, right? And so I think I think what we've started to realize as a society is that this lane is not the only way to learn and be successful. That's why certs exists. That's why, I think a lot of cases, certs and experience, mostly experience, everyone, like, it's experience number one, certs in some cases number two, depending on the career, and the degree is right below that. And then if you have the top two, no one really cares about the first one. And if you have enough of the first one, nobody cares about the two, So, like, I think as long as you're constantly, thinking about learning, and you're always thinking about, like, what your next move is, like, it's the right move. And I think what happens is HR departments are starting to realize that, because in a lot of cases, what you read, HR doesn't know crap about that stuff. Like, they're just like, that's what the engineering manager, like, gave them. And so you start to ask them questions about it, they're just like, I don't know. Like, I remember I was applying for a job at ADP as a solution center consultant, and, like, there's all these requirements, and I literally, like, I emailed back and I asked, I'm like, these requirements don't make sense to me. Can you kind of tell me, like, why, like, this is required for this position? Because I knew I had a buddy of mine that was in the position, and he was like, yeah, that, like, you don't need that, or that. And so I just challenged that, and ended up, and they were just like, you know what? You're right. And they just took it out of the job description. It's still not in there based off of just a conversation that I had.
Right.
Hell, the job I'm starting on Monday, like, they wanted, like, this, like, full stack developer, right, that does chaos engineering. And I literally said, that person doesn't exist. Because I'm an expert of chaos engineering. I've been doing it for 2.5 years almost, across a variety of different industries for small, medium, and large companies.
Right.
This person doesn't exist in my experience. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been doing anything. Like, then like, all these full stack developers would just been doing chaos engineering, and everyone's great, right? And then I was like, not interested. You guys don't know what you're talking about. No joke, 2 weeks later, they were like, you're right, please come talk to us again. We took that part out of the job description, and then, 2 interviews later, like, I started this new job on Monday. So, and this goes back to the challenging assumptions situation. Like, don't be afraid to ask, because the worst case scenario is they don't respond to you and you move on. And how many times does that happen, right? You apply for something, and, blah, 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 we're going to consider other people or whatever, right? And that stuff is a grind, and that is really, really difficult. But I often, this is actually another tidbit. One thing to remember is it's not just you interviewing, that you're interviewing for them. They have to be a good fit for you too. People forget that all the time. And because they're like, I just need a job, and like, no, you have to go in and understand that, like, if something is not a good fit for you, you can acknowledge that and peace out. And it is the most valuable thing, because I think that me saying no to interrupt made me a stronger candidate, because I gave them constructive feedback about why this wasn't going to work for them. And then they circled back, and they realized that I was right. And then like, we pushed through. I'll never forget it. We went from 0 interviews to offer in 72 hours.
Wow. Excellent. Well, I think we'll end here, because I think we've made the point. So where can people find you online, Jacob?
Good question. So you find me on Twitter, Duval King Jacob. I'm always yelling about Dungeons and Dragons and tech. So you can find me there. Hit me up on LinkedIn, Jacob Alexander Plicque III. I'm the only one there that has a picture, because Dad has a picture, or Dad has a LinkedIn that he doesn't use, that he's been trying to figure out how to delete for 15 years. I'll leave that where that is. But so check me out. Happy to help. Because I know, like, it's always really tough for a lot of folks to, like, connect with someone on LinkedIn and then, like, go right into the conversation, because, like, that's kind of like a faux pas of LinkedIn, of, like, which mostly because typically it's because you're trying to get somebody to buy something.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever, happy to talk, you know, and dive in deeper. I feel like honestly we could do a part 2 of this shit. So and dive in even deeper. So yeah, good times.
Good stuff. Thank you for being on the podcast, Jacob.
For sure, anytime.